So I've already replaced the stock pump with the one that's in the vehicle, but that one's giving me grief as well. So I did do a flush just to make sure it wasn't a question of bad fluid. I think there's something physically wrong with that pump. So I'm going to be installing this one tonight. So I'll be doing a mashup of both footages. So there may be some odd irregularities between the two. So the pump on this one has started to do funny things. So it's not too noisy now, but it was making some pretty impressive squealing on the trail last time out. And it definitely isn't reacting as well at idle compared to when you give it gas. So there's definitely a problem with the pump. Time to change it. So I removed the air box and the intake. There's a little temperature sensor, I believe, that's under the intake tube, so just be careful of that. And that gives me all the access I think I'm going to be needing to get to that power steering pump. So depending on what kind of inner fenders you have, one option is to access the pump from this side, because it's literally just on the other side. You can actually see the pulley right there. So that's one way of accessing it. I still have the stock one, and honestly I don't feel like messing around with these plastic rivets all the way around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tackle it from the top. Power steering pump pulley, there's a pressurized line, there's the line from the reservoir on this side. There's, I believe, 2 bolts at the top, one at the bottom that hold the bracket and the pump to the engine. And of course the belt's going to have to be removed. And to do that, I'm going to remove the tension with this opening right here. I can put a breaker bar. So the fun here is with a extension and a pry bar on the tensioner. If you push towards the driver's side, you're probably going to see that the belt is slowly moving. So you got to get enough of that tension off. Of course, don't pinch your fingers by accidentally releasing it to get the belt off, and then you can release it. The belt is off safely without damaging anything. I'll even show how I did a flush of this after to see if I could figure out what was going on. And I gave up and I actually went out and I bought a proper extractor because, well, I was just tired of making a mess. So I've already extracted as much of the fluid I could out of the tank. I'm going to start disconnecting the lines. Yeah, there's 3 bolts, 13 mil, 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom that have to be loosened. I like doing that before I break the lines, just so I don't end up with a bunch of fluid everywhere before I start. Oh, that one was pretty easy. So that one's already a little loose. Okay, now I just got to do the same thing to the other one. Here we can see the bottom bolt pretty well. There's out. So I partially reinstalled the bolt at the bottom because whenever I was putting my wrench on this fitting, it was just free spinning. So ideally a flare wrench would be best used here. It's 18 millimeter. For some reason I've got 2 of them and they've both gone for a vacation together. So just crack the line. There we go. For some reason the whole thing turns. I'll have to get another wrench. So if you have the same problem I'm having, you need a 27 mil to hold the body, and then your 18 mil to release the line. But I didn't expect it to be this bad. Oh, there we go. So after tightening up the 27 mil, I was able to loosen this just with one tool. So now I can see that there's power steering fluid breaking free. I've got a drip pen underneath waiting to collect some fluid. So now it's time to loosen this up. Hopefully some long needle nose will do the trick. It's a bit of an odd spot. So once it's worked up, you can just pull the hose up and out of the way. So there's a bolt at the bottom we'll have to remove. You can actually reach it from the top, so I won't even crawl underneath it. There's still a little bit of fluid dripping onto my hand, so maybe I should have waited a little bit longer. Get that bolt out. There, it's out. And while taking out the last bolt, just make sure that you hold the pump so it doesn't go for a tumble. in there. And here we can see that there's a clip, so just pull it out. And then there's another one at the bottom. And I'm going to get as much liquid as I can out of the high pressure line with the fluid extractor. We'll see how much I can vacuum out of it. So this time around, I'm also going to take the container out and flush it. So I'll pour some clean liquid back here to reverse some liquid flow through the filter and hopefully get any little sediments out. To do that, I'll have to pull off one of these two lines off the hard line and remove the bolt, and then I'll pull it out. So yeah, just make sure you have a drip pan underneath this, at least the old pump, for a while, because you're gonna have some fluid coming out of it just about anytime you pick it up and move it around, as you're seeing right now. So when you have the two pumps side by side, they should look very similar. Looks like this one was the original. It still has the Chrysler emblem on it. So they look very similar. I'm gonna have to double check the instructions because for some reason, this one seems to have has a little bit of play in it. So I'll have to check. Sometimes there's a part that has to be transferred over. I didn't see it in the instructions, but I'll double check. So now I'm up to pump number 3 on this Wrangler, trying to find one that's going to actually give me some good results. This is the original one that came out of the vehicle. It does have a little bit of play, which again I would expect out of something that is worn. This is the first pump that I put in. It actually has more in and out play than the one that I took out originally. Just to be sure, I got a second pump from the same brand. It doesn't move as much, but it does move a little bit. And it does have some oil left in it because it was in the vehicle. And finally I gave up and I got another Mopar where there's like literally no play. So time to install the Mopar unit into the vehicle. And hopefully the fact that this one has no play is the reason that it'll work. These two pumps are from the same manufacturer. They were built on the same day, so I'm not sure if it's just a fluke. But you definitely have to transfer over the bracket and this tube. So there's some extra washers in the kit for that. This should be 13 mil. Gotta be sure that it remains off to be able to transfer over the fitting here. So this one has one bolt. Well, that looks like a 10 mil. And it's off. So we could see that there's a O-ring in there. And I'll just have to double check the kit and figure out which one goes here before I put it together. But again, I gotta double check the instructions for this wobble. There shouldn't be any at all. The old one has even less. So then remove this cap. It'll be useful after to stop the other one from leaking all over the place. So in this kit, this is the O-ring that goes there. You want to make sure there's some lubrication on these O-rings when you put them together. And might as well give this a good little cleaning. Don't want any crud affecting that new O-ring. So often examine the old one just to see how things were aligned. So this is where the bolt goes. So I've moved the O-ring to the part to see how that'll fit. Or that went in a lot better. Line it up, find the bolt, tighten it back up. Again, it wasn't that tight. You don't want to break the casing. So I'm going to get a wrench and do it by hand. Leave that in there for now. Time to reinstall the bracket. Good thing is there's only one way to install it with 3 bolt holes. So start them off by hand. I'll make sure that they're threaded straight. Again, these weren't very tight either. So I'll just zip them off so they're snug. After that, I'll tighten them down by hand. That's what I like about that setting. It really doesn't have much torque. Yeah, that feels good. So here we can see the old O-ring that has to be replaced right here. So remove it with your favorite pick. And after that, it'll be a question of installing the new one. Make sure that you put a light coating of fluid on it before you start manipulating it, so you don't so you have less chance of ripping it. Now that that's in place, I can start reinstalling the pump. And I've still got the cap on here, so it prevents leaking any more fluid than it has to. So again, it's a question of realigning the bolts. Bottom ones here. Top ones are going to be pretty high. Oh, there. Doesn't really matter which bolt you put in first. Just put them all in loosely until they're all threaded in. So it's important that when you're tightening up these 3 bolts that you remember that, one, they're going right into the blocks. You don't want to over tighten them and break anything. So now I can remove this cap, and now I can thread in that high pressure line. So the fun with these lines is you always want to make sure that they're perfectly straight so that you're not cross threading anything. Started off pretty good, so that's always a good sign. Again, it's an 18mm. There. Now it's a question of sneaking in the supply line. And once it's all the way down, reposition the clamp. So now that the lines are reconnected to the pump, it's a good time to start putting fluid into your reservoir. So I haven't checked to see how much dripped into the pan, but something tells me it's going to be quite a bit. So now it's time to reinstall the belt. So what I'm going to do here is put some tension on it and sneak it back on. There we go. So now that I've got the reservoir topped up as much as I can for now, I'm going to start the engine. I'm expecting the pump to draw whatever is in this tank into the system. So I'll be turning it on, turning it off so I can come back and top it up. And once it stopped taking fluid, then I'll start doing the second step, which is turning the wheels back and forth to get whatever air is out of the system. So it didn't take long for it to draw all the liquid out of the system. So I'll top it up again and do that again. So that time the liquid barely went down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the wheels back and forth with the engine off just to see if I can get more bubbles out. And after that, if I have to, I'll start the engine. So right now the front wheels are off the ground. So I'm not going to have any more tension than I have to on the system. So clearly there was some air in the system. Test drive went really well. I was pretty happy with the results. The only issue was there's a check engine light. Let's see if it stays on. And that's because I had the engine running with the intake off. So let's erase it. It's erased. So hopefully now when I start it, check engine light will stay off. So it looks like it's happy now. So yeah, it definitely feels a lot better now when it's steering. So we went for a good drive, worked some more air out of the system, topped it up. Power steering feels way better than it ever has. So definitely, if you're picking up a pump that isn't Mopar, make sure there's no play in it. If you can, splurge on the Mopar rebuild. It's definitely going to give you a lot of peace of mind. So thanks for watching. Good luck with your pump replacement, and hope to see you on the next one.